Hello everyone, thanks for watching. Looking down at the visible satellite imagery here across the eastern Pacific, you can see kind of the western, let's call it the western third of the US here on the right side of the screen, maybe just above my head here where the camera is. If you look closely at the top of the image here, it's kind of obvious what we're going to be watching here, not only here today impacting our weather, but through the weekend as well, I think. This low pressure system spinning counterclockwise just kind of off the coast of at least well off the coast of Washington and British Columbia here. That's been obvious in the visible satellite imagery. This is associated with a moisture plume or a weak atmospheric river. We can actually tie that to this visible satellite imagery here, stretching back into the central Pacific, Hawaii, way down here, just kind of off screen. Weak atmospheric river event, that's already bringing rain and precipitation to the area. We can see that with just the clouds in this visible satellite loop. So some rain observations, more so drizzle here in the Sacramento Valley as of this afternoon. At the recording of this video here, Wednesday, kind of just early Wednesday afternoon. Rainfall being reported here in the Willamette Valley. That might be clearing out a little bit here, at least how consistent of a shield it was here getting into this evening. But I think things remain active there, at least for the next little bit. Some rainfall observations being reported now in parts of the kind of border of northern Oregon and Washington, so the Walla Walla area, the Yakima Valley, parts of Pendleton, as well with temperatures in the 50s. This system here is going to be pushing further to the south overnight tonight, so expecting more rain to kind of push through the Central Valley, not a tremendous amount. I'm not expecting any kind of major flooding right now, but snowfall as well in the elevations of the Sierra Nevada. They could be getting kind of a nice helpful addition to their snowpack late in the water year. So it's what? It's March 27th here this afternoon. We're getting to the end of the active season. It starts to wane. In a typical year in March as we go through the month, maybe even more so in April. But here we are. We have more precipitation to talk about, more colder weather. I think on the back side of the system as it rolls through, and then it feels like kind of a consistent pattern. Over the last 2 months, we get these systems in either late week or through the weekend, and then things tend to clear up during the weekend. That's going to hold, I think, next week as well, where we get kind of a clearing. I think some warmer temperatures, if even slightly so here early next week when we get a clearing. But unfortunately, just in terms of weekend activities, not looking like the best weekend for some of these areas here. We'll get into that. Let's get into the forecast here. If we just look down, this is looking at the precipitable water values, satellite derived across the eastern Pacific, parts of North America here. If you look closely, there's that weak atmospheric river. It's easy to tie that moisture back toward Hawaii, and that's what's pushing that clouds that we just looked at, the rainfall and the snowfall into the area. Not the strongest, one we've seen certainly here in late March. You go back to early March with the blizzard that we had. You go back to parts of February or even January with some of these stronger, more kind of prime water year systems, had a much stronger signature, and associated with it had flooding, kind of blizzard conversation, things of that nature. Not seeing that level of event here, but enough to kind of make the weekend, unfortunately, somewhat soggy depending on where exactly you are, or icy or snowy or flaky if you're at a high enough elevation. Winter storm warnings active here for the northern Sierra Nevadas as a result of that. Look at the present rainfall presentation. Again, this is Wednesday afternoon here, just after lunch Pacific time. There's that rain that was pushing through the Willamette Valley, trying to clear out here as that moves more into the border area. Again, the kind of Yakima River area, seeing rainfall observations, parts of Pendleton, Walla Walla. And there's that Sacramento Valley precipitation. Not a ton of this making it to the ground, seeing some drizzle observations there. The coastal mountains kind of blocks that, keeps some drier air into the valley, makes it harder to get the rain in there. Nonetheless, when it goes up and over the elevations of the Sierra Nevadas, snowfall expected in areas here, and those winter storm warnings, like I said, are active in the higher elevations there. When I take this forecast, this is from the ECMWF, so the European model. I'm going to take it forward through, at the very least through the weekend, give you an idea of timing and some of the rain and the snowfall here. This is valid here as of Wednesday afternoon, kind of early afternoon here across the west coast. You can see the rain that we just looked at in parts of northern California. You can see the Willamette Valley rainfall we looked at and some of the lighter amounts getting into eastern Oregon, eastern Washington. Snowfall at the higher elevations here in northeast Washington and parts of the Sierra Nevadas like we talked about. If I play that forecast forward, that kind of that axis of that moisture plume or that weak atmospheric river, those often kind of move from the north to the south slowly through the event, and we're seeing that here pushing more into the Central Valley overnight tonight around midnight with some rainfall expected here for the Central Valley. Not expecting very high amounts, maybe half an inch. When all is said and done with the system here, we'll have another piece of it, as I mentioned, coming through a little bit later. That's that low pressure system, the center of it at least, coming in later into the weekend. But snowfall expected as well along the Sierra Nevadas, with rainfall expected along the coast. Higher amounts, as is typical, along the coast versus interior locations. If I take this forecast into Thursday, you can see some light Perhaps some drizzle here as we go through the day and late Thursday, March 29th. or March 28th, I should say. That clearing out more so across California through the day on Thursday. But then Friday evening, that low pressure system coming down from where it was just off the coast of British Columbia and Washington, and see it now pushing closer to the coast of California. This is on Friday morning, to the point where Friday evening, it's now pushing and bringing heavier rain to coastal areas of San Francisco, Central California, Monterey, Oxnard, perhaps getting that far south, with increasing snowfall as we go through the evening, I think Friday evening, and then more so into Saturday morning. By the time we get to Saturday morning, closer to lunchtime, looking at the heaviest rain now coming into Southern California. So San Diego, Los Angeles, parts of the San Joaquin Valley, more snow expected in the Sierra Nevadas with that low pressure system spinning just offshore. Now, with these low pressure systems getting, land falling closer to California, expecting wind gusts to come up again, not as high amplitude as an event, that we've seen this year in terms of those wind gusts. No high wind warnings or wind advisories active right now. Not expecting anything too significant in that regard, save for maybe some areas at elevation or perhaps some wind advisories along the immediate coast, but not expected to be a big wind event, just not that strong of a system. Going through Saturday into early Sunday, could see rainfall getting into parts of the lower Colorado River Valley. Not much, maybe 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch, but it is possible here as we go through Saturday night into early Sunday, with that precipitation pushing off through southern, central, and southeastern Arizona at times. Perhaps through the day Sunday, some lingering showers here in the Central Valley. Negligible amounts rainfall-wise, unless you get stuck under one of these showers, for 20 to 30 minutes, where you could quickly get 1/4 of an inch or a little bit more. That system clearing out more toward the kind of Four Corners region as we go through late Sunday into Monday, and then ultimately into Tuesday, clearing out of the area as a whole, where I think we dry up and warm up a bit as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. So active weekend of weather, at least for folks here across parts of California, Nevada, Arizona. More so shifted earlier toward parts of Oregon and Washington, where we walked through that. If we look at rainfall totals here from the Weather Prediction Center, again, if we look here all the way through Monday evening, so an event total, if you will, but by the time this low pressure system comes through the area and gets out of here, look closely at the Central Valley, expecting amounts around a 1/2 inch, could sneak up above that. I think perhaps in the Sacramento area, maybe the Central Valley, the Central Valley, or the Sacramento Valley, some amounts edging up toward maybe 3/4 of an inch. If you look along the coastlines here, 1 to 2 inches along the coast, depending on where exactly you are. Santa Barbara area always gets a little bit more, maybe closer to 2 inches. San Diego coastline, maybe 1.5 to 2 inches with higher amounts up in elevations, and then similar amounts to the coast, I think, in some of these valleys here, anywhere from 1.5, perhaps the highest amounts, to 2. Not enough to introduce, big flooding concerns, but can't rule it out with some of these training systems as they come through the area. Again, more so through Saturday, at least for Southern California. Again, Willamette Valley, we're seeing the rainfall there, not extreme amounts, but keeping it wet there in spring. That's not uncommon. Some areas may be missing out, not seeing a ton of precip move into parts of northwest Washington. This is an area where we are seeing some drought settle in. We'll have to keep an eye on that, especially as I talk through kind of the long-term forecast closer to the end of this video. If we get snowfall here when all is said and done here, again, late Monday, snow event total. Sierra Nevada is looking anywhere from maybe 1 to 2 feet of additional snowfall here, maybe even slightly over 2 feet when all is said and done. Again, a nice boost to their snowpack here across the Sierra Nevada late in the season, seeing some improvements here in the middle Colorado River Basin, or really more the upper Colorado River Basin, I should say. Not a tremendous amount of snowfall here in the northern Rockies or the northern Cascades. This is the area here where we're still below average water year to date. So unfortunately, that likely to remain the case despite some snowfall moving in over the next 4 days. The areas that maybe don't need it tremendously are getting more of it here over the weekend. So the Sierra Nevada is 1 to 2 feet, likely to maintain some of these above average numbers, if not improve them slightly. And then really the Colorado Basin doing really well here. In fact, if we jump all the way back to that satellite imagery I showed you earlier, if you look really closely, you can see that snowpack here in parts of northeast Arizona, parts of Utah, parts of western Colorado, all that feeding into the Colorado River here that goes through the Grand Canyon and down through the lower Colorado River Valley. Jump over, just wanted to give you an idea of temperatures throughout the week here. This is today, Wednesday. You can imagine a little bit colder temperatures here underneath that cloud shield that we were talking about and the rainfall associated with that. Temperature is going to be coming down as we go through the weekend as that low pressure system swings down through the area, swings down, makes landfall in California, bringing that cold front with it, bringing those temperatures down across California going into Saturday, through Arizona on Sunday, and then Monday as well. Now that looks kind of on the color bar here brutally cold. Not seeing frost or freeze potential right now in terms of some sensitive areas here in the Central Valley or the lower Colorado River Valley. Temperatures will be below normal, maybe even well below normal at times, just not getting quite enough down there to prompt frost or freeze concerns. But nonetheless, kind of a continuation of these cold bouts that we've been dealing with that we saw in the long-range forecast a little bit earlier, maybe in March and late April. This is Monday, April 1st. If you look maybe toward the northwest, that's when that warm-up is going to start. Again, it seems like for whatever reason, the weekend we tend to get the active weather in, and then unfortunately, early in the week when maybe we can enjoy it a little bit less, that's when we get that warm up. You can see Tuesday now, temperatures increasing across half of California, parts of Nevada, definitely Oregon, Idaho, and northwest Washington, and then parts of Montana as well. If we look at the ensemble forecast here, this is from the ECMWF. We're looking at the trough and ridge pattern here. I'm going to make this valid here as of Wednesday into Thursday and give you an idea of where we might be going in this pattern as we get out into next week. Talked a little bit about that brief warm-up we're going to see next week. What might we see after that? Well, that will be of note. We've been in this kind of consistent, I've talked about it, weekend. We seem to get these systems during the week. We tend to warm up, clear out a little bit. I'll take this forecast into Friday. Again, this is just here through the 28th and then the 29th and the 30th. This is that upper level trough that we just looked at, the low pressure system associated with that. That's bringing the rainfall in, cloud cover, rain for California, bringing those temperatures down as that sits off the coast of California, comes through the weekend, exits the area. And now by Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we have this weak ridging here kind of centered over Oregon, Northern California, parts of Idaho. This is bringing in that break in the precipitation, bringing the warm temperatures in the northwest half or maybe 2/3 of the region here. As I take this forecast into late week, Thursday and then into Friday, we can see another trough trying to plunge out of the northwest. That would return some cold weather, certainly to parts of the western U.S., certainly for parts of Idaho, eastern Oregon, California, Nevada. Depending on how deep or how high amplitude this event is, some of those cold temperatures could get all the way down toward Arizona or Southern California or the Central Valley. Again, not saying this is a major kind of frost chance, but with these cold temperatures here, with the trough influenced over the western U.S., it would increase the chance of us getting closer to that 32-degree number. Something to watch as we get out toward the end of next week, with potentially some precipitation associated with that. I will say, if it follows that trajectory, and if you watch closely, this trough more coming out of almost British Columbia or Alberta, Canada, that's less of a chance for it to bring in a lot of Pacific moisture, whereas if that trough, more so like the one we just looked at, was positioned just off the coast here, that allows it to tap into that Pacific moisture and bring in the high rainfall, bring in the 2 inches of rain for the coast or the 1/2 inch to 1 inch in parts of the Central Valley or the Willamette Valley. If it settles in like this, we're probably would see some showers across the interior, maybe even parts of Montana where we talked about needing some moisture, but that's not going to be this big precipitation event. More so, at least for maybe folks in California or Oregon, a temperature event in terms of lower temperatures versus something like a big rainmaker or snowmaker. If we look at the temperature anomalies through, let's make this valid through Friday of next week. So we're looking well out into the forecast, an 8-day forecast at this point, Friday through the early week of that next week. So definitely getting well out into the forecast here. But you can see that strong signal from the ECMWF ensemble here of those colder temperatures likely getting out into next weekend. So that's why I said it might be more of a cold temperature event versus a precipitation event. And maybe just to get a difference of opinion here, if we look at the GFS ensemble over that same time period, can also see the consistency of that trough dominating across the western U.S., expecting colder temperatures. If we go back to maybe the video last week or the one before that one, we talked about how those long-range ECMWF or European models for April were showing that kind of consistent cold signal, at least early in the month. We might be seeing that come to fruition here as we look through the first week of April out into maybe even April 8th, 9th, and 10th here. We get precipitation anomalies over that same time period. See maybe slightly drier conditions here, kind of upstream of that trough and then downstream of that, expecting maybe some showers here across the interior, hopefully getting into northwest parts of Montana to boost their rainfall. Seeing just a slight signal here through Southern California. Not the biggest signal really in either direction. Again, with that trough maybe more coming out of Canada, not as big of a precip maker here across the west coast, if anything maybe slightly on the drier side for folks in the northwest with that kind of regime setting up. If we look at the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, this April 4th through April 10th, again kind of through that first week of April. Again, colder temperatures forecast from them. I think that makes sense with what we saw from that trough diving out at the end of next week, bringing temperatures down across this area here. Again, perhaps as far south as some of these more sensitive areas to frost. It's not saying it's going to frost, not a definitive forecast, but something again to keep an eye on as we look into the future. If we look at their precipitation outlook, again, slightly above average in terms of those precipitation chances, more so for the interior, I think parts of Montana, Utah, Wyoming, eastern Idaho potentially. Maybe some excess precip here into parts of California and Arizona, but again, with that trajectory here, not really expecting a widespread precip event for folks along the immediate west coast or the Central Valley, for example. If we look out further into the future, those extended forecasts, the ones that I think had a good clue on that pattern, at least what we're seeing here in early April, we saw in those extended forecasts, maybe even early in March or late February perhaps. Those same extended forecasts here from April 5th out to May 5th from the ECMWF, still sticking with that colder temperatures regime across the western U.S. Maybe not the best forecast that we want to see at this point if we're trying to get more spring or summer weather into here. But again, this looks like more troughing across the west coast, what we're seeing, again, in that forecast that we just looked at for that first week of April. If we jump over and look at the precipitation anomaly, looks really similar to that Climate Prediction Center precipitation anomaly from the 8 to 14 day slide. In fact, I'll just flip back and see that. A little bit of excess precipitation here in the interior, drier for the northwest. If I look back here for the 8 to 14 day, they don't quite have that dry signal, but near normal for the northwest, wetter into parts of the interior. So perhaps staying power with this pattern that we're watching now. If we jump over, this is the Climate Prediction Center. This came out last week here for the summer seasonal temperature outlook. This is, again, something we've been concerned about this year is increased temperatures in the interior. Forecast right now for the interior west, and where this overlaps with some areas that don't have quite as good snowpack, which do have some classifications here along the drought monitor, increases the chance for a more stressful summer in terms of heat, lack of water, and then eventually perhaps through the end of summer, getting into the wildfire season, which could be elevated in areas here if this forecast comes to fruition. In terms of the summer precipitation outlook, again, not as much to be seen here across areas that don't see much precipitation at all as we go through summer, parts of California, Arizona, even Oregon. But again, the interior locations that can get some precipitation in here in the summer months, not seeing it here on the forecast. So if we kind of overlap the fact that we have low snowpack in this area, the fact that we've had missing some moisture here, particularly in this area of Washington, we're expecting more heat through that area through the summer months, at least from the Climate Prediction Center here, and a lower chance for precipitation. We have some overlapping ingredients for drought and heat stress and potentially a wildfire concern later in the year. So something to be mindful of for folks in the northern Rockies, Northwest, maybe northern Cascades as well. Something we've been watching going through summer as well is the kind of fading or the weakening of El Niño. Right now, most of these models here expecting that weakening to continue, perhaps weakening by the end of the year, maybe even late summer into a La Nina. Some of these forecasts showing a weakening of those Pacific or a cooling of those Pacific Ocean temperatures toward a bona fide El Nino as we get into late summer, early autumn here. Some of them not as aggressive. In fact, if I pick on one that's going to sound familiar here, the ECMWF, that is that purple bar that was just showing up there, not even getting us to La Nina by the end of summer. So that's a more slower weakening of La Nina here. It's not a guarantee that we're going to be in a strong La Nina next water year. That would have a number of implications, I would think, but that's definitely the trend right now. There is a La Nina watch active from the Climate Prediction Center. Enough of these models are showing La Nina by the end of the year that it's certainly a concern as we go into next water year. The kind of good news or the silver lining there is the areas that I just talked about, parts of Montana, northern Idaho, parts of the northern Cascades, could have, if early indications are correct, may have more of a stressful summer. La Nina, we tend to get a little bit more precipitation in there through their water year in the La Nina year. So maybe a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of where they might be going, but that's too far away, I think, right now to say anything definitively. We have to get through the summer. We have to get through right at the end of March here, which is still 3 to 4 days away. So last thing I want to mention before the end here is Hawaii. I talked, I think, more so back toward the kind of middle of winter, maybe the end of last fall, that Hawaii tends to correlate. Their kind of latter half of the wet season, which they're in right now, tends to be drier than average during these kind of El Nino events, certainly when the El Nino is fading in the new year. They've seen some dryness at times. We have moderate drought here on the southern slopes of Maui, parts of the Big Island here, and some abnormal dryness here, again, on kind of the leeward side of the islands here, but not widespread significant drought. And I think that's good news given the correlations we talked about earlier in winter, that we haven't seen the development of extreme, severe type of drought in Hawaii. Could see development further as we go through March and April here. The good news is, just looking at kind of 6 to 10 days, 8 to 14 days, I think there'll be increased chances for precipitation as Actually, I'll take you all the way back to that precipitable water conversation we were having earlier. As these kind of bend back over, and you can see another event coming in behind it, they can leave some remnant moisture that can come across the islands here and bring some increased rain. They've had other frontal rainfall events here over the last kind of 2 to 3 months that have aided them in staying out of the worst of the drought here. So another silver lining, I think, from this fading El Nino. That's all I have for you all here today. Until I see you next Wednesday, thanks for watching.